Hello, ghosts, ghouls, and goblins. My name is TBS Guy, and it's been a long time coming, but I can finally ask the question, what is the new deal with Mordekaiser? I say new, first of all, because it's the rework, and he's new, he's not the old one, and, you know, we're talking about the new one, but also because we have done a What's the Deal with Mordekaiser video already, and I needed this video to have a slightly different title so that it doesn't show up, like, it doesn't mess with the search algorithm or something. So, if you want to watch the old What's the Deal with Mordekaiser, then there's going to be a card up in the corner. You can take a look at that one. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be talking about new Mordekaiser. Now, I've talked about him a little bit before. Specifically, once his updated character design was revealed for the rework, I did a video about that, and I voiced a whole lot of sort of complaints I had about him. I was saying, like, a lot of complaining, basically, where I was kind of sad that we're losing the goofier aspects of Mordekaiser. Like, he was this big metal man who was just, like, this mess of spikes for no goddamn reason, and he looked like the villain from some 1980s toy cartoon, and he all had moves named after heavy metal songs, and he was sort of a little bit of a goofy League of Legends Skeletor to me, and I was kind of sad to lose that. But, you know, we've dealt with those complaints now, so we're not going to be bringing them up in this video, because I have got a whole new list of complaints to grouse about, because nothing is ever good enough for me. I hate everything. I don't like any characters in League of Legends. In fact, I hate the entire game, and there's absolutely no reason for me to cover it on the channel ever again, or at least so say some of my commenters who get really upset that I criticize their big evil metal man. However, there is a lot to like about the new Mordekaiser. Like, there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of good concepts going into his execution. And we'll talk about those alongside a few broader complaints about the way that Riot is handling the broader League of Legends universe, not so much Mordekaiser specifically, but first, let's just talk about the basics of his lore. So, Mordekaiser, once upon a time, was named San Usal, or something along those lines. I'm sure it has a better pronunciation, who was like he was a Conan the Barbarian villain, basically. He was this evil warlord who just killed tribes people and made an empire and just murder, death, kill, warrior, yada, yada, yada. And basically he's doing it because he wants to get a seat at the gods' table in the glorious Hall of Bones for all eternity. This is like League of Legends with Valhalla. Like, spend enough time in life just being a complete asshole to literally everyone, and you get to party forever in the Hall of Bones. That's gonna be cool as heck. So San Usal is like, yes, I'm gonna be the best at being an asshole to people, and I'm gonna have the coolest party ever when I die. So then he dies, and there's no party. There's no party, there's no Hall of Bones, there's no, like, you know, sexy bitches that want to get with him, and drinking and fighting for all eternity. There's nothing. He's just in a big black ghost desert that sucks. And he kind of throws a little bit of a hissy fit about this, because, like, hang on, I was promised a party. I want a party. I want to speak to the goddamn manager here. There isn't a manager. There's literally almost absolutely nothing. And he lingers on basically just because he's so pissed off that he's not getting the afterlife that he wants, that he doesn't fade into oblivion like the other ghosts. Eventually, he learns to speak ghost language, basically, and he's able to speak across the Veil of Death and tempt a bunch of sorcerers into bringing him back to, not so much life, but at least back to the world of the living by fusing him to a giant set of armor, making him functionally completely invulnerable and completely immortal. Now, I don't know if you know this, but generally speaking, bringing back hateful specters from beyond the Veil of Death with the expectation that they will keep their promises and also give you power and not just murder you immediately is a really bad, stupid idea, and no one should try to do it because they never keep their promises and they will always just murder you the moment that you are no longer useful to them. Mordekaiser is no different. He kills the sorcerers who brought him back. He uses their souls to make himself weapons, specifically a weapon called Nightfall, his mace. And he changes his name from Sanusan, which is his human name, to his spirit name in the ghost language, Ochnun, Mordekaiser, which a more literal translation from, you know, human languages would just mean it's like Emperor of Death, literally, would be the sort of etymology of that kind of name. Anyway, he's got an in-universe justification for his name now. That's nice. So he builds himself a new empire, because he's immortal and no one can kill him, so that makes it kind of easy. And he also has a bunch of necromancy on his side now, and he's got a lot of superpowers and all kinds of shit. So he builds himself a grand empire, and at the center of that empire, he creates the Immortal Bastion, a huge fortress that lore fans of League of Legends will recognize as the capital of modern-day Noxus. Now, people are sort of pissed off with Mordekaiser because he's just like, he spent his entire living life being an asshole. Then he died, and then he came back and spent even longer being even more of a giant asshole. So, a whole bunch of tribespeople, they do the full, like, Lord of the Rings killing Sauron kind of thing, where everybody bands together and a grand alliance marches on the Immortal Bastion, defeats his armies, and he's betrayed from within by someone, presumably LeBlanc, based on what we know about League of Legends lore. And they managed to destroy him. They managed to sever his connection to his magical armor and banish him back to the realm of death. Hooray! The evil is defeated. Surely nothing bad could ever happen. Oh dear, it was actually all part of his plan. He wanted to be defeated. He wanted to be destroyed and cast back into the Shadow Realm, because the whole point of him being alive in the first place, or undead in the first place, and killing people and establishing the Immortal Bastion and all that, was to enslave as many souls as possible to his will. Souls that are now waiting for him in the afterlife, where he builds for himself another empire. Like, he's just building empires all over the place. First when he's alive, then when he's undead, and then when he's double dead, he builds empires and empires and empires. And this one, though, has a grander purpose, because not only is his new death empire forged from all the people he has killed going to be his grand new afterlife that he has built for himself, it's only going to be the first step of building that afterworld. And as for people out in the real world, like, it's been centuries since Mordekaiser was defeated. Most people have forgotten about him, but those who remember are like, boy, it sure would be bad if Mordekaiser found a way to come back, because we don't really think we can defeat him a second time. It would be super duper bad, you guys. The whole world might be in danger. So, what's Mordekaiser doing? Well, he's planning to return from undeath, of course, to destroy the entire world. This is detailed in the story The Final Reign, which is his color story, or his extra story, basically, where we get a few more, like, vignettes of insight into the various stages of Mordekaiser's existence. We get to a little bit of insight into his mind when he dies as San Usal, and, like, what drives him to make the decisions that he does. And we get some vignettes from his undeath and from his current state of being in the afterlife, preparing for a war on the living realm. And as we learn by the end of the story, the time has come to return to the world of the living. All the souls of Runeterra await. Mordekaiser raises Nightfall in one hand, and so his final reign begins. This is his plan. He will take the army that he has built in death and set it loose upon all the living people of Runeterra to carpet the entire world in death and build for himself the afterlife, the empire that he feels that he is owed, that he deserves for being just the absolute best at being a huge freaking asshole to everyone. So, Mordekaiser then. He is essentially... he's not Skeletor anymore, and I've completely accepted that. What he is instead is essentially a kind of Sephiroth for the League of Legends universe, or, well, you know, a JRPG final boss, like this narcissistic, self-obsessed, lunatic madman who's just gathering power to himself, relentlessly just empowering himself, and obsessed with building a world in his image, a world that revolves around him, a world that serves his purposes and his desires, and where nobody else matters even a little bit, where everything revolves around him, his will, his domination, his absolutely everything, his aesthetic, his wants, his desires. He wants to remake the entire world into his own image, or at least into his own desired image. And I kind of like the idea of that. Like, I like the idea of creating a final boss for League of Legends, basically. Like, this world-ending, desperate threat that is a threat to literally everyone, everywhere on Runeterra, and who can probably only be defeated if everybody puts aside their differences and their conflicts and fight together the life, you know, fighting against death, which is, you know, common thematic point that you hit in fantasy, is like this representation of death that's coming for all the heroes and all the villains of your world, and everybody has to band together and fight for life versus death, and that's like it's a good versus evil, light versus dark, life versus death kind of conflict. The only trouble I have with that is that someone's already doing that. Like this is already happening. Up in the Freljord and down in Shurima, the Void is slowly festering and threatening to invade Runeterra, and much like Mordekaiser wants to turn the entirety of Runeterra into a homogenized reflection of himself, so does the Void want to turn the entirety of the physical universe into a homogenized representation of itself. Like, the Void basically wants to unmake all of creation, because creation is this unbearable irritant to the Void. So it wants to spill into the material realm and turn it into just more Void. It wants to get rid of all living things, homogenize them into nothingness. So who's the final boss of League of Legends? And this here is the source of a bunch of my new complaints, is that not so much about Mordekaiser. He's actually he's like okay on his own. He's the final boss of League of Legends. I can work with that. But the problem is we already have a grand world-ending threat against whom everybody must band together and fight as one in order to survive, and that's the Void. In fact, we have another one. Also, remember Rise? Remember how Rise has been spending centuries going around gathering up all the world runes because their magic is so powerful that if you use them all together, you could literally tear the entire planet apart? That's also a grand world-ending threat, like that sort of is in the style of Thanos with the Infinity Gems. If someone managed to put them all together, everyone is gonna frickin' die. So that's kind of there also. And League of Legends is sort of becoming, like, with the addition of Mordekaiser on top of all the rest, we're sort of starting to have maybe too many final bosses. Like, we're starting to have too many fundamental existential threats to the League of Legends world. We're starting to have too many fundamental existential threats to Runeterra. And at some point, they kind of stop feeling impactful as individuals. Like, oh god, the Void is going to take over and destroy absolutely everything, and that's terrifying. But also Mordekaiser, oh no, he's going to take over and destroy absolutely everything. Oh no, the world runes are going to explode and destroy absolutely everything. Which one are you supposed to be scared of, is basically my, like, when you take League of Legends as a holistic universe, which one is supposed to be the grand threat that the League of Legends universe is aligned against? And I think what Riot are trying to do here is that they're trying to create a set of villains that are sort of self-contained. Like, we're not really supposed to think about how Mordekaiser and the Void interact. Like, if the Void breaks through in the Howling Abyss and out of Ikathia in Shurima and starts devouring the world, will Mordekaiser then try to fight the Void? Like, will they go up against each other? Will they cancel each other out? What's gonna happen when that? And I think we're kind of not supposed to think about that very much. I don't really think that's supposed to be important, because once you start thinking about that, the shape of the world, like the shape of the narrative that League of Legends is building for itself, becomes really weird and fuzzy and indistinct, because they're very different thematic ideas. This threat of oblivion, of nothingness, this cosmic horror idea is very different than the specific evil undead warlord wants to turn every living thing into an empire of death for his own narcissistic purposes, whereas the Terror of the Void is that it is a thing without ego. It is just this horrifying, uncaring, cosmic threat that will wipe you out and never have a second thought about it, because it doesn't recognize, it barely even recognizes that you exist, whereas Mordekaiser has this narcissistic idea of wanting to build kingdoms, but for himself. Like, I kind of, again, my complaint here is not with Mordekaiser himself. Like, his concept is fairly well executed, I think. My complaint is more about how do we square him with the threat of the Void, with the threat of the world runes, with the threat of whatever other world-ending catastrophe might be coming to Runeterra at some point. And that's sort of a bigger question that I would really like the League of Legends lore to start answering soon, like how we're supposed to conceptualize, because what would work a lot better for me was if Mordekaiser's plan wasn't to destroy the entirety of Runeterra, but like he was going to come back and take over Noxus again, and then he was going to take over like Demacia and the entire continent for himself. That was going to be his after, like his plan was to take over the continent rather, because then you would have a storyline where like Mordekaiser's thing is not about being a world-class villain, but a villain against whom Noxus and Demacia must stand together. So he's a feature in their particular storylines, right? That would kind of work for me better than the idea of Mordekaiser as a world-ending threat. Because then you can kind of, go, okay, we have to defeat Mordekaiser first. He's like the mid-boss to resolve the storyline between Noxus and Demacia, before we then move on to the true final boss of the narrative, which is the Void, which is the thing that has to be stopped in order for the entirety of creation to survive. So that's my primary complaint there. My other minor complaint is that, like I said, that Mordekaiser was sort of a Sephiroth for League of Legends, right? And the trouble with having a big, grand, narcissistic villain like Mordekaiser is they generally work best if they have a nemesis. Like, if they have someone or something against whom their like narcissistic solipsism can be contrasted and which can be sort of created interesting. Like, think of Thresh, for example. Thresh is like, yeah, he's a villain, whatever, but he's a lot more interesting because he is Lucian's villain, because he has that interaction with Lucian where he's stolen his wife's soul, and he uses Lucian's guilt and self-hate against him to kind of bait him and torment him, and Lucian has to overcome his own self-hatred and guilt in order to defeat Thresh and set his wife's soul. Like, there's a whole dynamic there going on that kind of, that furthers storytelling, right? That encourages storytelling, that encourages storylines to being created. Mordekaiser really doesn't have that. Like, he kind of lacks a compelling nemesis, someone who can plausibly stand against him, where we can get invested in the drama of, oh, can the hero be ready to defend the world against the evil of this guy in time? Like, he lacks a Frodo to his Sauron, basically, is what going. He lacks an Aragorn and a Frodo and a band of heroes to stand against him. Because on his own, he doesn't have that much personality. Like, his personality is, I am evil, I am the best at being evil, and I'm gonna conquer everything and kill everyone because I am evil. He's a very one-note character who would be a lot more interesting if he was contrasted thematically against some other heroes who need to learn that, like, the narcissism or the love of death or whatever Mordekaiser embodies is a bad quality within themselves that they have to overcome. That classic, hero's journey, story arc kind of thing. That would make him a lot stronger for me. But again, as a standalone villain, he's fine. He's perfectly fine. He's perfectly serviceable, and especially with his new character design, he's compellingly intimidating. Anyway, that was 17 minutes just, ranting about his lore. Let's talk about his actual character design. Now, I've already covered this a little bit, but Mordekaiser's character design, the new one is a substantial upgrade over the old one. First of all, in that he's a lot more iconic in his expression, in the sense that you can identify a few key elements of his character design that can represent him in a way that old Mordekaiser was a little... Like, what's the iconic element of old Mordekaiser? It's not really his mace, because that just has the same spikes that his armor does, and it's not really his helmet, because that is like just a helmet. It's not really unique or interesting. It's just the red eyes. And it's kind of hard to determine one iconic element of old Mordekaiser. But for new Mordekaiser, you've got like, oh yeah, the helmet. Show me that helmet in any context and I will know, yeah, that's Mordekaiser. He's the only one who will have these ridiculous rabbit ears going on his helmet thing. And he's got a much more unified, cohesive aesthetic as well, where you can kind of see like the idea of the spikes is integrated a lot more cleanly than it was in his old armor, where they just kind of jutted out absolutely everywhere. Here, there's a clear like intentionality behind where they're placed. So with Mordekaiser, like, you got the helmet, you sort of also got the mace, although that borrows a lot of shape language from Thresh's lantern, which is a little bit of a pity, I think. So there's like a much more iconic profile. There's a much more easily recognizable silhouette for him that I really like, which is some really strong design work going on his character model. I'm also very, very fond of his animation specifically. Let's see. Oh, that's not the move I was looking for. The trouble with these is... there we go. His walk. See this. Something I know Necrit, my good colleague with like 10 times more subscribers than me, has complained a little bit about Mordekaiser's new walk cycle in the sense because of the way that you can kind of see if we scroll through slowly. Look how he throws his weight around, right? He takes a step, his foot lands, then the weight of his body follows that, and then once his body has landed, you can see how the armor kind of follows. And what you get from that is this dunk, dunk, dunk. You can kind of see how the armor bounces a little bit as he walks. Right, and you can kind of see that carry over in a lot of the ways that he moves, is that he'll make a movement, and then a lot of the weight of his character, like his mace and his armor, will kind of follow afterwards, sort of trail after it, which is something that I really, really like as an idea. You can kind of see it here as well, how he stomps, and then his head kind of does the head bang to kind of carry the motion through. This is called follow-through in animation, by the way. Here especially, you can see it. You can really, really see it. Like, all the bounce that's going on with his head and with his arms. And I think the idea of that visually is that Mordekaiser is a haunted suit of armor, basically. Like, he's an empty suit of armor. There's no body in there. He's just a spirit ghost that's inhabiting the armor suit. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The only criticism I have is that that doesn't quite come across in the character model, because in Mordekaiser's character model, you can kind of see when you pause what happens, like the head boink. The problem with the character model is that when we look at the character model, there very much is a body in here. It's not an empty floating suit of armor, really. It's a very physical, present body that we've got going on here. And I'm a little disappointed with that. I would really have liked them to not render a distinct set of arms there, to have a translucent body inside, so that it's more clear that what's going on here is essentially a haunted suit of armor. I feel like the head bounce might be a little much, like that might be a little goofy for him, but what I really like about the way this animation is conducted is you get the sense of weight, right? You get the sense that there's 2 tons of metal moving across the screen here. Yeah, the head bounce is definitely a little bit much. I think they should have kept the head steady and then have the armor bounce around that, but with the head sort of keeping this steady, sort of regal, dignified thing. But I definitely but there's so much to like about Mordekaiser's animation. The only thing I don't like about Teemo GG's model viewer is that it's sometimes a little bit hard to parse exactly what's going on with some of the motions there. But like, take a look at this. Take a look at this. This is one of his auto attacks, right? Take a look at that. That's so cool. This is something I love in animation. I'm such a huge fan of squash and stretch and smearing, and Mordekaiser has that going on in spades. You can see how when he swings his mace, the mace completely deforms. It becomes almost plastic, almost like rubber, and then it hits. And then when it hits, you get this little in order to really let the impact land. This is a technique you'll see in anime a lot, where the swing happens quickly, and then boom, you get that little moment of pause once it hits, and then he moves through to the follow-through, where he catches the mace and then stands back down. And I really love this. Because for me, again, when you have a character like Mordekaiser, when he's swinging this giant thing around, in order for the weight to really register, in order for you to really feel the weight of what he's doing, I don't think it's enough just to move the object. It's not enough just to swing the mace, like just having it moving in a direction. You do have to deform it. You do have to smear it a little bit to really get that sense of weight and power across. And I can see some people where they feel like maybe some of it is a little bit overdone, like there's a little bit too much exaggeration in some parts of it, a little too much breaking of the model. But this is also something that you have to take into account in terms of how the model is going to read, because like in game he's gonna be something closer to this size, right? And that's where it makes a lot more sense, because it makes the movement of the character much more readable. And with a big bulky character like Mordekaiser, that can be kind of important, because there's so much with him going on. Like, he's got all the spikes, he's got all the stuff going on his armor, and if the motion of his body wasn't sufficiently sort of exaggerated, it can be kind of hard to read exactly what he's doing. And with Mordekaiser, reading what he's doing is a little bit important, because I don't know what that is. Because if you can't read what he's doing, then you can't see, like, is he auto-attacking, or is he using his spell? Is he auto-attacking, or is he using his Q? Like, is he auto-attacking, or what exactly is he doing there? So I think there's an importance to sort of slightly exaggerating, at least, some of the motions of Mordekaiser that are going on here. I do love this swing as well. You can kind of see it again here, how it's not as exaggerated as we looked at the previous swing, but you can see how the mace is deformed and stretched a little bit out here, just to kind of make the impacts land. And you can see how here he hits the target, right? And there's just a little moment of pause there. It goes, right? You have that little wind-up swing here, winds up, does the motion, and then he lands here. There's just that little tiny moment of a pause that makes the impact land harder, that I really like. I mean, League of Legends generally has an absolutely S-tier animation department. The character animation on the champions is fantastic, and I adore it. I really genuinely do adore it. Because it's such a hard discipline, especially with a game like League of Legends, where some people will be running it at 60 FPS, 1080p, and everything at the highest quality, but some people will be running it at 30 FPS, like 480p resolution, basically. And you have to account for those people as well, and that can make it really difficult, because like when you have high resolution and high fidelity on your screens, then you can kind of do whatever the hell you want, and it's a lot more readable than a lot of other things. Like it's a lot more easy to distinguish what's going on with him and what he's doing when you have that high fidelity. But when you don't have that high fidelity, when you have something that's lower fidelity, that can be a lot tougher to communicate. So League of Legends has to... Seriously, what is that thing? Has to really communicate a lot in a format that's readable at many different levels, so that it looks good when a dude like me goes into the model viewer and zooms the hell in like this, where you can see, oh, there's a little bit of clipping where his mace is going directly through his leg. That's kind of unavoidable. But it also has to read good to people who have to look at him in a size like this. In fact, zooming out really far can be a good way to appreciate just how clean some of the animation. Like, you're not in any doubt that Mordekaiser is walking here, even though his character model is so small. You're not in any doubt, like, what he's doing with his mace, even though the character model looks so small. No matter how small and blurry you kind of make this, you can kind of still read what he's doing just from the way that the motions are translated on screen. And that's what makes the animation of Mordekaiser, in my opinion, so damn good. Okay, that was too high zoom speed. Oh, I think we lost him. Oh no! I'm gonna have to reload. There we go. He's back. I got him. I found him. Oof, I love this. I love this a lot. This is probably my... I also made a point of commenting on this one previously, but this is probably my favorite of Mordekaiser's attack animation, because look how he starts. he's all hunched over like he's taking a poop in the woods. And then look how much he stretches. Everything about him just becomes completely distorted out into this rising tide of power as the maze rises over his head. And then... it's like Mr. Fantastic out of the Fantastic Four. I love this so much, because this is something that League of Legends couldn't do in the old days. Like, the character models that League of Legends used to have, you couldn't do this. The rigs just weren't designed to allow this kind of extreme animation flexibility. I'm Mordekaiser. I'm a terrifying revenant of the dark shadow. I'll fear me. Boing. I love this so much. This is so good. And again, part of the point of this is that even when you're looking at something at a terrible resolution, at a very low quality, you are not in any doubt what the character is doing at any point in time. It's readable as hell. That's what makes it good, which is why the exaggeration works for me. And the thing, I can see the argument that it would be kind of nice, especially for a character like Mordekaiser, to be a little bit more dignified, right? Like, to be a little bit less silly and cartoony in his expression and to be more, like, big and stoic and kind of unmoving. But once you do that, the movement of a big character like this becomes so much less readable. So that's my defense of Mordekaiser's animations, because, like, I have many criticisms of League of Legends. Many criticisms of League of Legends, but the animation department are consistently just some of the best in the business at what they do. Anyway, I think that was about all I had to say about Mordekaiser, the Iron Revenant. There are a lot of complaints about sort of the general full scope of where League of Legends is going as a lore thing and what they're doing with the universe, but Mordekaiser himself is kind of fine. He's not an exceptionally interesting villain, but he's perfectly well suited for the role that he's supposed to play in the League of Legends universe. I'm concerned about how he's going to interact with all the other massive world and villain threats that we have in that universe already, which hopefully Riot's lore department will be able to resolve for us at some point. And as a piece of character animation, like most other of the recent additions to League of Legends, he's just a masterclass. He's just absolutely fantastic. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you should feel very free to hit the like button, the subscribe button, the comment button, and all the other buttons so that YouTube doesn't kill my channel because it's not active enough or whatever. Because YouTube will do that. They will literally send a person to your house to kill you if you don't upload on a regular schedule. That's what I've heard anyway. Like, that's any YouTube channel that doesn't upload anymore, that's why. It's because YouTube murdered them and used their carcass to feed new YouTubers in the pods that they've got, like the grand fields of YouTuber pods that are being incubated by the machines to take over. We're living in the Matrix, everybody. Oh no, they came for me. I'm a little loopy, can you tell? Anyway. What was I supposed to... Right, Patreon. I have a Patreon. I do have that. You can support the Patreon if you're so inclined with $1 a month if you want to, and there's some rewards over there, some voting on video topics and other stuff that you can go and look at, and I'd be very grateful. I also have like some tip jars if you want to give me not... Instead of signing up for a monthly subscription, you just want to say, hey, you got really weird in the outro to your Mordekaiser video. Here's $3. Please don't ever do that again. You can do that in those, and I'd be very grateful for it. And as I say at the end of my videos, even $1 or $2 to content creators like me can mean the same as thousands and thousands of views on a video. Like, it makes such a bigger difference than you think to even give a very small amount to a content creator. So whether it's me or whether it's someone else, if there's a content creator online whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly, because all of us would rather work for you directly than work for the ad revenue generating algorithms that exist at Google headquarters. So, you know, just keep that in mind. Of course, if you can't do that because money is tight, believe me, all content creators know the feeling, and we don't blame you one bit. I'm just happy personally that you watched the video this far, in spite of my endless rambling. If you haven't enjoyed this video, well, there's a dislike button down below that you can click on, and legend has it that once a person clicks on enough dislike buttons, thousands, hundreds of thousands perhaps in their lifetime, once the dark specter of death descends over their life and they shuffle off this mortal coil, in the afterlife, there will be a grand reward waiting for them. Specifically, 500 dead YouTubers who's gonna kick the crap out of them, fucking us over in the algorithm, because, like, that's why we die, people. You people clicking the dislike buttons is why YouTube sends assassins to kill us all. And when you get to the afterlife, we will find you, and we will make some really mean call-out videos about you. I'm just saying. Thank you very much for watching this nonsense.